Hello and welcome, and thank you for being part of WorkSafe's webinar, WorkSafe's Priorities to Reduce Workplace Harm in Construction. My name is Cameron Ling, and I'll be your host throughout this session. Today, I'm joined by two WorkSafe experts, Jimmy Dwyer, a Senior Inspector Health and Safety. Welcome, Jimmy. And also James Webster, a Senior Construction Advisor. Welcome, James.
Thanks, Cam.
Great to have both of you with us, and thanks for your time throughout this session. Today's session is backgrounded on the fact that construction remains one of the highest risk industries for serious work-related injuries and fatalities. We'll cover today how WorkSafe's Priority Harms project aims to drive a reduction in the number of lives lost at work by focusing on the most prevalent causes of harm and its priorities across civil, commercial, housing and demolition construction. Now, this session will run for around about 45 minutes, and in the first half, we're going to explore the following key topics: the four subsectors of construction that WorkSafe is currently focusing on, the common hazards that these groups face, how WorkSafe is supporting employers and employees to ensure their workplaces are as safe as possible. Then we're going to open up audience questions. So there's an opportunity for you to ask the questions that you want the answers to. You'll see on the right-hand side of your screen, that's the box there that you can put your question in, and feel free to start putting those questions in as soon as you want. Once you've entered it, click enter and it'll pop up on my screen, and I'll ask those questions on your behalf when we get towards the end and the question answer portion of this webinar. Righto, let's get straight into it. Jimmy, I want to start with you, if I could. WorkSafe's Priority Harms project has been supporting the Victorian construction sector for a year now and aligns with WorkSafe's Victoria Strategy 2023 to drive down fatality, injury and illness rates. Could you give us some background about the strategy behind the Priority Harms project and what it broadly seeks to achieve?
Yeah, thanks, Cameron. We recognise that each subsector of construction has its own unique hazards and consequently risk controls. It is clear in our data and through feedback from our inspectors and our stakeholders of what the big issue problems are. Unfortunately, we do see the same big problems time and time again. We put together the scope and content of Priority Harm program by working with our inspectors and our external stakeholders, such as employers, unions and other organisation bodies. We also get information from complainants, anonymous persons, but also employees and workers or builders. This program has been in place for all of this year so far, and we seek to achieve a reduction in workplace harm on Victorian construction sites. And I personally hope it does continue throughout 2023 and beyond.
Well, thanks for that, Jimmy. Can I stay with you for just a second? WorkSafe is focusing on the most prevalent causes of fatalities and serious injuries and where they are most likely to occur in the building and construction industry. What are you seeing across the construction sector that is driving you in this direction?
Thanks, Cameron. Again, it's a combination of our data that is reinforced by what we are seeing on site. On a daily basis, when I'm driving down, sometimes to work, sometimes home, sometimes to a construction site to undertake an inspection, I see workers working at heights without full prevention controls, and it is frustrating. The most prevalent cause of harm haven't changed too much since we first started constructing things in Victoria. As you probably realise, Victoria is it's a booming state. There are more and more buildings going up. Even the last 2 years, construction has slowed down, but compared to other states, it is soaring. We are still coming across issues from falls, from heights, electricity issues, dropped objects, structural and trench collapse, and plant. The big issues that I see, all of these issues are big, but the two biggest ones I see is falls and electrical issues.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jimmy. Too often it just happens time and time again, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If I could turn to you now, James, you've identified 4 subsectors of the construction industry for particular attention this year: civil, commercial, housing, and demolition. Why those areas?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. It's a great question. So we have chosen these 4 subsectors as these are the most prominent subsectors in the construction sector. So they make up, I suppose, the majority of it, of this sector. I do have a graphic I'd like to show you, if that's okay. So this is a flyer that we developed for the Construction Priority Harms program. And it actually shows us the 4 subsectors, as well as some of the unique hazards, or not unique, but some common hazards that we find across these subsectors. What is common about these is those hazards, but the unique thing about this is the way these hazards present themselves. So we can see electricity in commercial, maybe temp boards, power tools, and stuff like that. Whereas in civil, maybe underground cables overhead. One thing I'd also like to point out as well is crystalline silica is common throughout all 4 subsectors. These subsectors also represent a large proportion of our injuries and unfortunately fatalities as well.
I understand that you specialise in the commercial subsector of construction. How will the Priority Harms Project help commercial employers and employees? And what are your tailored initiatives for this group?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So the Priority Harms program will help employers, employees, and inspectors in recognising what is the most prevalent causes of harm in that particular subsector. It also helps to inform what risk controls are reasonably practicable for the commercial subsector. This will help bring about consistency in the application of risk controls across the commercial subsector. So it's a great thing.
Jimmy, you've already mentioned that unfortunately falls from heights and the use of electricity are major physical hazards that affect all of the 4 subsectors you've targeted. Tell me, Jimmy, why are these priority harms common and why are they still the most prevalent?
Thank you, Cameron. Well, each subsector shares falls from heights and electricity as common priority harms. The source of harm may vary. For instance, a fall from a height issue on a housing may be present when you were installing roof trusses. Other falls might include falling from an EWP basket, accessing and egressing heights, falling off a ladder, maybe falling through a stair void. So there are many different reasons why people may fall from a height. Building design. Unfortunately, what we have in Victoria is many different building shapes, designs. During the building of the structure, there's less, it appears in my point of view that there's less consideration gone as to how it's going to be built in terms of safety. Scaffold members, a lot of trades, or some of them I should say, actually do remove scaffold members. That can actually compromise the structural integrity of the scaffold itself. Whereas in civil, it may be created from digging a 3-metre excavation, such as 1.5 metre trench. There is a risk of persons falling into that trench. To become injured, you don't have to fall from a certain height, i.e. 1.5 metres into a trench or 2 metre. You can actually suffer serious injuries from falling less than a metre. They are still prevalent in the construction industry because it is hard to eliminate from falls and electrical related issues. Keeping in mind electricity, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't feel it. It's invisible to all of us.
I appreciate that, Jimmy. James, if I could go back to you, you mentioned a little bit, just a little bit earlier about crystalline silica. Work that involves crystalline silica has been identified as a health hazard across all the subsectors that you've identified. I understand there are new regulations around these. Do you think people really understand them and are following them effectively?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So I think people do understand them. There's a lot of familiar concepts in these new regulations, which actually helps us in construction. So if we have a look at hazard control statements for high-risk crystalline silica work, They're not too dissimilar from a SWIMS, something that we should all be pretty familiar with in construction. The information data sheet, a requirement for manufacturers and suppliers of crystalline silica substances, are not dissimilar from safety data sheets that we expect for hazardous substances. Of course, these are new regulations, so more work is needed to help promote these and get the awareness out there.
Great, thanks for that, James. Jimmy, other hazards in these groups are varied and include things like moving plant, falling objects, and structural collapse. How important is it for employers across the subsectors you've identified to consider other priority harms from another subsector?
It's a very good question, thank you. It is very important, although we've worked with the industry in identifying the 4 or 5 which may be in your subsector. Your duty as an employer is to identify and control all risks which may be present in your workplace so far as reasonably practicable. It's also important to recognise that construction sites change every day. So too many things can happen. Too many hazards, unfortunately.
So Jimmy, just continuing on from that, what broad advice would you give construction operators when addressing and mitigating these priority harms?
Firstly, work with your employees in identifying what hazards are present at your workplace and implementing risk control measures. Secondly, seek to implement the highest order of controls, that is to say, the best risk control. Thirdly, review and if necessary, revise your risk control measures. This may occur if there is a sign that the risk isn't working as good as it should be.
James, just jump to you for a second. Small operators in the construction sector might say they don't have the resources or the time to do what you want them to do. What would you advise them? How can WorkSafe help here?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ling. So running a small business, it can be pretty tough work, but seeking advice and input from your employees can actually help bring about a solution a lot quicker. WorkSafe also has an advisory service where you can seek guidance from, particularly on OHS matters related to construction, and they'll put you in touch with the inspectorate. WorkSafe also funds the OHS Essentials program. So this allows employers to receive a free, independent health and safety consultation to provide advice on improving health and safety in that workplace. It's free, it's a fantastic service, and it really does have fantastic results.
Great stuff, James. Jimmy, back to you again for a sec. What is WorkSafe doing to roll out the Priority Harms project, and how are you working across the sector to help manage their exposure?
WorkSafe inspectors will be visiting workplaces taking a strong compliance and enforcement approach targeting priority harms. In addition to compliance and enforcement activities, we'll be influencing change through partnership with industry, including education and an awareness raising, developing media campaigns, and by encouraging research into new solutions.
Jimmy, can you give us some examples here? Campaigns, industry partnerships, channels, or activities you want our audience to look out for?
Things to look out for would be our safety soapbox, our website. It's a fantastic website, a lot of information on it. We also run regional events like the cross-border projects and the Build Aware projects, where we will be promoting the Priority Harms project.
I really appreciate you, Jimmy and James, for your insight on what you've been speaking about there. I am keen to get to some questions because there's a number coming through from our audience today who perhaps want to deep dive on a couple of the specifics that you've been talking about. I'm happy for either of you to jump in, or I'll try and guide the questions as best I can. Maybe I'll start with you, James, with this one that a few people are asking. I'd love to find some guidance regarding fall protection when working over water, installing precast concrete panels as part of bridge/pier works.
It's a great question. So of course we have our compliance code falls, preventing falls in general construction. That has a lot of a good information in there, relevant risk controls. In terms of bridge and pier works, we can certainly look to see whether we can improve our guidance in that space. It's a fantastic question. I'd like to see maybe some more explicit guidance in that space. So thank you for the great question.
And that's one of the great things about the questions we're receiving on all these webinars, but also across the last couple of weeks of Health and Safety Month, is the questions are all kept and taken under advisement. And I think there's a number of groups will try and improve certain things or get answers to a lot of these questions. So we really appreciate all these questions that are coming through. Another one here, and happy to direct this one to you, Jimmy, initially, but James, please jump in. Is there a database which outlines what products are preferred over others to reduce the risk of exposure to silica dust?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Look, I've got two answers I'd like to give on that, and James, you might want to also contribute to that. Look, the first answer is we do have a compliance code that covers silica. Within that, it makes recommendation as to what controls is highly recommended. The view from WorkSafe is if a duty holder or business implements a highest order of controls that's detailed within the compliance code, then it is deemed that the duty holder or business has complied with the Act and regulations. So that's the first answer. The second answer I'm going to give is a duty holder must be able to demonstrate that they are using the highest order of control where reasonably practicable.
I might weigh in a bit more on that one, Lingy and Jimmy. We don't have a particular database per se, but what I would encourage the person who's asked the question is we've got the safety data sheets, which will tell you about the silica content for any respirable crystalline silica products. I spoke before about crystalline silica substances. So these are products that contain more than 1% crystalline silica, are not in a respirable form, and are likely to be mechanically processed. So we've actually asked those manufacturers and suppliers to create information data sheets. So that makes sure that whether you're working with respirable or non-respirable forms of crystalline silica, you have a fantastic document there that tells you what the proportion of crystalline silica is and how to work with it. So what I encourage you to do is have a look at those documents and compare what products are safer, what has less of a proportion of crystalline silica. So I'd encourage the person to start there.
And any of those documents, James, and there's a question relating this to any of the documents you're referring to, they're all on the WorkSafe website?
No, you'll be seeking these, the information data sheets and the safety data sheets, you would seek from the manufacturer or the supplier of those products. But as Jimmy mentioned, we do have a compliance code on hazardous substances, and we do have a document called Working Safely with Crystalline Silica in the construction sector, and that is, of course, on our website.
Great, thank you for that, James. This one, again, happy to be guided by either of you who wants to answer this one. But Megan asks, given the increase in residential construction and then resulting civil construction, will WorkSafe increase inspector resources for site visits, both responsive and random?
I'm happy to have a tackle of this one, Jimmy.
Yeah.
It's a great question. Thank you, Megan. We have each year, we have consistently put on more and more inspectors, and that will result in more and more random and response visits. So yeah, great thinking there, Megan. We've got the same line of thinking.
Fantastic. Jimmy, I'll go to you on this one, but again, James, please jump in. How big an issue is bullying in construction?
Go for it, Jimmy.
Yeah, look, we know that there is inappropriate behaviour in construction on building sites. We don't receive many service requests or concerns raised from victims within construction. It's a very good question. James, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to go on that. So I don't have any particular data on the levels of bullying in construction, but those of us who have done apprenticeships know that it can be often grueling at some points. So I would encourage anyone who is experiencing any bullying or any OVA issues or any other psychosocial issues in the workplace, particularly construction, I'd encourage you to reach out to WorkSafe Advisory Service. You can call up anonymously and you can tell us what's happening. An inspector will come out to site and have a look and try to get to the bottom of what's happening. But I don't have any particular data on the level of bullying in construction at this stage here.
Right. No, thank you for that, James.
Can I just add to that?
Yeah, certainly.
Not so long ago, I was sitting in a cafe and I came across, I met with the two directors who own the cafe, lovely young blokes they were. And I got talking to them and I asked them the question, how did you establish this cafe? And the two blokes sat down and they said to me, we are actually qualified carpenters. And I asked, why did you get out of carpentry? What made you move away from building? And their response was they had enough with inappropriate behaviour and bullying on the construction site, so they decided to leave. So it is. We know it happens, but I suppose Melbourne's such a big state in terms of its infrastructure and building that workers can quite easily just resign and move to another job, another builder, and not report it to us.
Thank you for that, Jimmy. Just a question here coming from a few people around some clarification around crystalline silica. And James, I might put this one to you.
Sure.
Can you explain the difference between engineered stone control plan and crystalline silica hazard control statement, and when and who completes it?
Yeah, sure. So if we think about these new crystalline silica regulations, they're almost split into two. So we can think about the engineered stone component and the hazard control plan that's associated with that. That will be for people who work with engineered stone. So we can set that aside for one moment. But for construction, we're thinking about hazard control statements, and they can be incorporated into the SWIMs. Sorry, and yeah, could you please just let me know the second part of that question again, please, Cam?
Yes, certainly. So it's the difference between the engineered stone control plan and crystalline silica hazard control statement, which you've touched on there. And then the last bit was when and who completes it.
Yeah, it's a great question as well. So when do you complete it? We realise that the industry has taken up generic SWIMs and generic hazard control statements. That's fine, but what we ask is that you review them on a site-by-site basis to make sure that all that information that you're putting in there is relevant to that particular site. Who completes it? Well, of course, the employer should be completing it, and I'll be encouraging everyone, the employees, labour hire, whoever else, help fill in the rest of that content and really make sure you get all that buy-in there.
Great, thank you for that, James. Great to clarify that. It's important. We keep asking those questions, so it's really clear. This one, again, whoever wants to jump in here, please do so. Can you explain the? Sorry, that's just the question I was on. When was construction induction white card training, learning outcomes, and participant competencies last reviewed? Is it time for an update?
A great question. I'm not too sure on when it was last reviewed. That's the honest answer. I can certainly have a look into it. I do imagine we would need to be keeping that contemporary, so I imagine we review it often, but I don't have the answer in front of me at this point. Apologies for that answer.
No, that's completely fine. Jimmy, do you have any other information?
Yeah, like James, I don't have the answer either. I've been working here for about 4 or 5 years, and I understand that they used to have the white card, I think, and then that changed to the red card, and then that changed back to the white card. But like James, I don't have an answer on that. Good question, though.
No, that's great.
I have heard that we are looking at incorporating some more components into the training framework of the construction induction, but I don't know whether anything's been announced at this stage. So.
Okay, great. And I want to reiterate what I said before. All these questions are kept and they are acted upon. So that's certainly one that can be followed up, and also perhaps questions asked about when or if it is time for an update. So thank you for that one. Jimmy, are there new hazard trends WorkSafe is seeing across the sector, I suppose, above and beyond what we've been talking about initially?
Yes, I believe there is. The one that comes to mind is asbestos. We all know asbestos is around. Friable is quite dangerous. Demolition of older buildings built around the 60s, 70s, 80s, a lot of them do contain asbestos. So it would not surprise me if that's roped in to future projects.
Great, thanks for that, Jimmy. Yes, James?
I might also talk a bit more. People say that silica is the new asbestos, but I like to say that asbestos is the new silica. And with that, silica, we've turned our mind to it a lot, and we are actually diagnosing silicosis a lot better nowadays. So in terms of trends, we are actually coming to grips with how many people in construction and beyond are being diagnosed with silicosis. So that is, I suppose, a new trend that we are identifying. Not so much a new trend, but more so just coming to grips with how prevalent silicosis can be across all industries.
Tricky one here to answer. How do you find the influence of unions on safety at construction sites? Happy for either of you to take that one.
Yeah, sure. So unions play an important role in keeping workers safe and making sure that they go home every day. In terms of the influence, we work with them as a external stakeholder, and we value their feedback just the same as we value feedback from employers, industry associations. So we value the feedback of all our stakeholders.
Great, thank you for that, James. One question coming through from Ren here. I visit companies in domestic and commercial construction. The standard of safety is lower in domestic. That's Ren's opinion, that statement. What resources outline what they need in place?
Yeah, I can answer that. James mentioned this Business Essentials program, which is a fantastic program that's rolled out by WorkSafe. It's a good question, by the way. I have actually referred or offered domestic construction companies to partake or to participate in the Business Essentials program, and they have got a lot out of it. In addition to that, as an inspector, we do go out and we conduct inspections, and we do provide guidance material as to what they should be doing or looking at. There is a lot of valuable information on the WorkSafe Victoria website. You can download hazard alerts, but also our compliance codes. Victoria is very multicultural. It has been for some time now. So a lot of our guidance material is written in English, but also other languages. But the last thing, I suppose, and I think James also mentioned, is we have a call centre. Our highly skilled operators do answer questions. We can't act as consultants on behalf of construction businesses, but we can definitely refer businesses and duty holders to the compliance code, the regulations, the Act. We can even come up with ideas as to the sort of control measures that are out there.
You talked, Jimmy, there about identifying those control measures and everything like that. Perhaps this question flows on to that, so I'll stay with you, but please, James, jump in. What are WorkSafe's thoughts on generic swims, often requested by clients to provide standard swims, but find writing them on site more effective, is the statement that goes with that question. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I've come across a lot of generic swims. I personally don't have a problem with it as long as it's fit for use, it's relevant, and the higher order controls are recorded within the swims. The controls are inducted to the workers, and the controls are actually being used. So many times I've attended a construction site and I ask them, please produce your swims. And they then produce me with the swims, a bundle of paper that thick. Looks like it's just come off the printer. I have a look at it. There's no coffee stains. There's no dog ears. It looks perfect. I look at the swims, the control measures, and a lot of it's not relevant. So I speak to the duty holder and I say, look, please point out to me what the controls are to prevent uncontrolled falls. And they're unable to locate that because it's a generic swim. Again, I can't see any problem having a generic swim as long as it's relevant and as long as the workers are inducted and the highest order of controls are put in place. The second part of your question, it is quite handy to have a swims template, whether it's electronic, iPad or paper. Have the swims on site, induct the workers to the work site, ask the workers what their tasks are, what the issues are, what the controls will be. Make sure everyone understands what the controls and document in the swims.
Do you have anything to add to that, James, or Jimmy's covered it?
I agree with Jimmy. WorkSafe's guidance, the swims guidance that we've published on our website, we've just recently redone that. It does talk about using generic swims. We don't have a problem with generic swims, but just as long as they are tailored to that particular site, just keep in mind that you need to have them on a site-by-site basis, and it's to be relevant. So I agree with what Jimmy's just said.
Great, thank you.
Yes, can I add just something very quick there? I've come across swims, and some of the controls within the swims are just not relevant. So if duty holders use the generic swims, that's fine. I grab a pen and cross out what's not relevant and make sure workers understand what the controls will be.
Great. Thank you for that, Jimmy. James, I'll go to you on this one.
Sure.
Chris asks, when will the new psychological regulations be implemented in legislation? Will there be industry specific, as in construction guidance? Why the delay?
I'm not too sure as why there is a delay. I'm not in that particular team, but I understand that they will be released sometime next year. I believe the date will be announced shortly. I'm not too sure if we'll be releasing particular guidance on a industry by industry basis, but it could be something we can look into.
Continuing on for mental health issues, James, this question a number of people are posing. From your experience, do construction workers give much thought to mental health issues?
I like to think we do. There's a lot of good initiatives, mental health first aiders, a lot of industry organisations are promoting mental health in the workplace. And in my experience, both on the tools and as an inspector, we receive and we look out for our mates. So we receive this information about mental health very well, and we look out for our mates in construction. So I do think that we do look after our mental health in construction. That's not to say that there are other psychosocial issues there, but I do think that we are cognizant of the fact that, we do need to look after ourselves in construction.
Great, thank you, James. This one, again, a number of people are asking this one, and happy for either of you to jump in here. Can I receive guidance on the requirement to complete a plant risk assessment yearly? I cannot find any reference to this in the Act or compliance code.
You can find the compliance code plant. It will talk about managing the risk controls in there. We don't prescribe a particular risk assessment, but it might be something useful for you to do. But we don't prescribe a risk assessment to be done. We just ask for you guys to control the risk. How you arrive at those risk controls maybe for a risk assessment, but we have not put that into these particular guidance materials.
I think I know the answer to this next question, but I'm going to ask it so everyone can hear it. Is there any information on your website on installing trusses safely, as most walk around on the top plates, and what is the best practice for this installation?
I'm happy to have a go.
Sorry.
That's all right. So we do have compliance code preventing falls in housing construction, and it talks about this very issue. We talk about having your 3 planks working from a ladder where you can. So it's all in there. It's a really, really great document. I would encourage the questioner to have a look at that great document. Jimmy?
I was going to say exactly the same. So it is a great document. I refer to it all the time. It's free on our website. Print it out, have a look at it.
This one just referring back to crystalline silica. What is the best way to assess the risk of crystalline silica in existing infrastructure like roads and footpaths, e.g. profiling an existing asphalt road?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we think about particular substances, the crystalline silica proportions may vary. So in concrete, we can assume around about 30%, bricks around about 40%, bitumen. I'm not too sure on that off the top of my head. But you can do a bit of research to understand the proportion of crystalline silica in each particular substance. On top of that, if you wanted to understand what levels of exposure are going to be, what levels of dust is going to be generated, you can do some atmospheric monitoring. So you can set up some static monitors to understand what is in the air. You can set up some personnel monitoring, whereby a pump is connected to the lapel of the worker, so you can understand what dust is being generated in their breathing zone, which is a really, really handy tool. Or you can just jump straight to risk controls and say, okay, we're going to be drilling into concrete today, so we're going to be using an on-tool dust extraction method to remove all that dust. Or if you're going to be doing some concrete cutting, you can use wet cutting processes. So there are options out there to understand how you can understand what levels of dust is being generated, or you could just jump straight to risk controls and say, we're going to take this very, very seriously and run with the highest order of control reasonably practicable.
Great. Thank you, James. Next question. I'm probably going to need some help with this from you guys so I can understand the acronyms and abbreviations, and quite a few people asking it. How does WorkSafe interact with COR-HVNL? Can you explain that to me and for others? Do you need the letters again, James?
I've got them here on the screen. I would encourage the questioner to maybe expand on what those acronyms are.
Okay.
They're not coming to me immediately, but that once they're expanded upon, I might be able to provide a bit more detail.
No, that's okay. No worries. If you guys don't know what they mean, I'm certainly not going to. So as James just said, if you want to re-ask that question, there's a few people who want the answer to it. Could you just expand it a little bit, and we'll do our best to answer that one. Jimmy, this one to you. If there is one thing we could all do from today to make our workplace culture better, what would that be?
The first thing that comes to mind is communications. Without communication, the culture will always be wrong in most cases. Communicate with your workers, communicate with your bosses, communicate with subcontractors. Make sure that there's open communication. Have toolbox meetings at the beginning of the day. Identify the tasks to be performed and the controls. When you have a toolbox meeting, when you communicate, you observe the body language as well. You ask them the question, how are you feeling today? We all have bad days. We all have near misses when we're driving a car. We may not have slept well the night before. We wake up on the wrong side of the bed. We attend work and we get into it and we're feeling terrible. So I do think communication is the most important thing, but it's not just verbal, it's also watching as well.
Great, thank you for that, Jimmy. Really important messages there. I do have a little bit of extra information about that previous question. How does WorkSafe interact with chain of responsibility? Was the COR chain of responsibility from National Heavy Vehicle Regulator? Can either of you answer that one?
I can't off the top of my head. I'm not quite across the heavy vehicle national regulator. But it's a great question and something I can have a look into and hopefully get in touch with that questioner.
Okay, that's another one of those questions that will be followed up on. I can assure the people who are wanting the answer to that one. Jimmy, back to you again just for a second. How do you think the Priority Harms project will evolve into the future?
How will it evolve into the future? I think it would pick up other hazards in the workplace, psychosocial. That's already been discussed. I think it may also include ergonomic. I understand that manual handling is a big issue in construction, especially with concrete layers, form workers where they're constantly kneeling, stretching forward, unusual postures, sustained awkward postures. Again, they're not really reported at the time of the incident because I don't think it's a reportable incident. So I think that will also be included along with asbestos.
Great, thank you, Jimmy. James, can I ask one more to you before we run out of time? And quite a few people are asking this question. What is your position at working at 1.7 metres on A-frame with planks to do block work, industry practice in Tier 3, but a dangerous activity we are advocating for change?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks, Cam. Again, I'll be encouraging the questioner to have a look at the compliance code, prevention of falls in housing construction. We would encourage not to use A-frames as a trestle. You should be using proper trestles with guardrails set up. You should be using mobile scaff, EWPs where possible. I would encourage to avoid using A-frames. It's not what they were intended to be used for. Again, have a look at the compliance code, prevention of falls in housing construction. It has a lot of great examples, a lot of great pictures, and it is written for the housing industry, by the housing industry, to make sure that the information is relevant and is reasonably practicable.
Really appreciate all the questions that came through. There are a heap more there that I unfortunately not going to have time to get to. I assure you they will end up being viewed and reviewed and really important. I apologise to those people who've posed questions that I can't ask right now. James, just really quickly to sum up, as a summary of your Priority Harms project, any final takeouts from you to employers? Anything you'd like to leave with them?
So although these harms are prevalent throughout these 4 construction subsectors, risk controls are typically easy to implement and they're often very effective. WorkSafe has, as we've just discussed, has published a whole heap of great resources to help keep you and your workmates safe on the job. If you need any further help or advice, please feel free to contact our advisory service or sign up for the OHS Essentials program. We have the Safety Soapbox and we have other great events throughout Health and Safety Month that you can sign up to and learn more about creating a safer workplace.
All really important things. James, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat to us today.
Thank you, Lingy.
And thanks to you, Jimmy. Really appreciate you passing on your advice and taking the time to have a chat.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Great to have both of you with us. I hope that everybody has found this a really interesting and informative session. The webinar that we've just had will be available online via WorkSafe's website next month. So in about a month or so's time. So you can view that at any time to just check up on a couple of things that you may have missed today. We will make a note on the screen shortly of any of the contacts that we've talked about today that you may find helpful if you're working in construction, looking to mitigate potential harms on your sites. We love feedback here at WorkSafe as well, and we always want to improve our webinars and our health and safety month. So we will be sending out a survey to everyone in around a few weeks' time. If you could, please don't do what I do and see a survey and delete it straight away. If you could please fill that in and get it back to us. That information is really important to keep honing that message and making sure we're really hitting the target. And there is an opportunity to win something for all of those people who complete the survey. There are 5 $100 vouchers that you could win, and winners will be notified via email or the phone number if they supply it in around about a month's time. So we'd love that feedback. Please get it into us so we can keep those messages coming. If you have any further requests for information, please get in touch with WorkSafe and ask those questions that you need answers to. And remember, if there is something that you want to discuss urgently when you're at work, please contact the WorkSafe advisory line. And don't forget, the emergency line is open 24/7, so please utilise it. We really appreciate you joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. All the best.